money on my mind, 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 money on my mind. So money is all I think of. Money on my mind, 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 money on my mind. So money.
Oh man, it's good to be back, y'all. It's good to be back. Welcome, all my beautiful listeners. It's your boy, Bookity Blondie himself. I like the new name though, Blondie McFly or something like that. Whatever. But you guys, welcome back. Happy New Year's. We made it to 2023. I always want to thank you guys for tuning in and listening to the show. Dang, I can't believe it. I'm in 2023 and I'm still recording and talking about finances. I really appreciate it. This is your host, Darrin Harvey, and this is Financial State of Minds, the show where I help you get to that bag, manage that bag, and grow that bag as best as possible through financial literacy and all things money. So hopefully I will not butcher this episode because I actually have not recorded in over a month. So trying to get back in the groove of things, have some fun, and let's keep it real. It's not going to be that fun of an episode. It's going to be a very personal episode. So I don't actually lost track what episode I'm on. I think I'm on episode 21. I think this is episode 21, 20. We'll figure that out in the edit. I want to kind of warm back up into these sessions and talk and really share my detailed story about taking care of my dad. So before I get started on the story, what's the point? I want to put this out there before the end of this story. There is a point to this story. This story is to show two things. One, why I care about financial security. And two, the importance of having some type of financial security. I hope that my story that I share with you guys on this episode really hits home these 2 points. So without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it. Episode 20 something. That's the name of the episode. 20 something. Story time. All right. So in my very first episode, weird that I say I have a very first episode, but on my very first episode, I kind of talked about myself, talked about my journey and what really made me want to do financial coaching, want to do financial consulting and literacy and even business consulting as a whole. So to recap on that episode, I've been through a lot of crap, a lot of traumatic experiences in my life. Each experience can probably be its own episode, and maybe one day I will turn them into episodes. But the one that really hits home and the number one experience that made me want to be insanely secure when it comes to having money is my experience taking care of my dad and being a part of my dad's journey of his final 4 years of life. So just a reminder, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's at age 61. They think that he had it around age 59, but he was diagnosed at age 61. Before that, I want to say age 50, 51, maybe 49. I don't quite remember because I was very young. My dad did have kidney failure, kidney disease. So for everybody out there, this is why I'm very passionate about health and keeping your body healthy, which plays into finances as well, because the more money you make, the better quality food you can have. But kind of digressing, my dad had kidney failure, kidney disease, and he had Alzheimer's. I wasn't paying too closely when it came to his kidney disease or his kidney failure at first. Around that time he was diagnosed with that, I must have been 18, 19, 20-ish around there. So I'm over here having that college life. I'm over here turning up. I'm around all the beautiful women. I'm over here becoming an alcoholic, doing a lot of cannabis, just having a good time, enjoying my college experience. And my dad was very good about making sure I didn't worry about him, as of any good father would probably or likely do. He was very good about making sure that I wasn't worried about him and worried about his health. So, when I was in college, this is 2008 and 2012, my dad, I did understand that at that point he did have some type of kidney problems. But again, I don't believe he was going to dialysis like that at that time. I don't even think he had started at home dialysis yet. It was just a thing that I knew he had. And then basically at that time, it was just like, okay, he has to eat a little bit healthy. He can't be having fried chicken every day. And that's really how I took it. So fast forward a little bit to around 2012, 2013. And then, I'm out of college. I'm still working full time at Target, trying to transition into my career field at the time, which is sociology and doing social like work. And I really am starting to notice a little bit my dad's health is declining when it comes to kidney failure. But again, it's nothing really major. I think this is around the time he started having in-home dialysis. He's still driving. He's still doing adult things. He's still independent. So that's kind of all I noticed and stuff like that. As the years go on, 2013 again is when my brother commits suicide. So that was a real, obviously, traumatic experience and weighed heavily on me and my father. But my father, unlike me, didn't really talk about his emotions too much. He really kept his emotions inside to himself. As far as I know, talking to his best friend, who I also call my uncle, he didn't really disclose too much emotion when it came to my mother and even my brother. But the whole point is, again, I'm not really seeing how my father is dealing with kidney failure at this time. So also want to bring up the fact that my father had a girlfriend after my mother's passing, and I really depended on her to kind of keep tabs on my father, and she was kind of stepping up immediately to fill that role. So again, I'm 24, 25. I'm not really gripping too much. My dad has the support he needs. I'm 20 something, I'm trying to figure out my way in life with this degree in this field. And again, not too much, but I am kind of noticing. Also, keep in mind, I'm diagnosed with glaucoma at 24. So I already have my own health issue that I'm dealing with on my plate anyways. So let's just kind of fast forward. And I'm noticing now by 25, 26 especially, he's now in dialysis. He's going independently. He's driving himself there. I'm literally down the street. And he's getting dialyzed, meaning that for those who don't know what that process is, you go into a dialysis center. The most big popular one, at least here in the Bay Area, is the Vita. And you go there and the machines essentially clean out your body because your kidneys cannot do it yourself. So it started with just, I think it was like 1 or 2 days a week, and he would go in for like a couple hours. And then eventually it increased to essentially really full time. So he was going there 3 days a week, and he was being dialyzed 4 hours per day. So now it's 2016. I'm actually at my heaviest at that time. By mid 2016, I want to say summertime, I was 316. I was 316 pounds. And yeah, I'm just getting out of a relationship that was pretty toxic, to be transparent. And again, I'm just trying to figure out stuff in my life. But 2016 would be pretty much, you guys, is arguably the worst year I've ever experienced in life. I got out of the relationship, like I mentioned earlier. My vision is getting worse and worse. It would, unbeknownst to be my final year, I would be driving. And essentially, around November, I got into 2 car accidents, basically that fall, September, I think it was like October, November. I ended up getting into 2 car accidents within six weeks, I believe. I think it was like within 6 or 8 weeks. I got into 2 car accidents, totaled 2 different cars. So I knew at that point I was done. Contrary to belief, I chose to stop driving. The government didn't take my idea away. None of that stuff happens. Fun fact, as far as the government knows, there's only a few agencies in the government that even know I'm legally blind to this day. But the point is I got into these accidents and I knew that was my time. I had to quit driving. So I was supposed to go to Oregon. It was supposed to be me, my god brother, God bless his soul, Jamal. We were supposed to go to this road trip to Oregon to visit some friends that we knew up there. Jamal was going to drive. Now that I couldn't drive, yeah, we're going to go on a road trip to Oregon around Christmas time or the holiday time. I don't remember exactly when, but it was holiday time. And we're just going to have a good time. So he ended up getting sick. He ended up getting sick to the point where he did not feel that he could safely drive us up there. So that was a real bummer. But unbeknownst to me, I would find out the real bummer news. My dad asked me to accompany him to a appointment at Kaiser, and I'll never forget this day. We went to Kaiser in Fremont. At this time, my dad was clearly having some type of memory loss, but I'm just thinking, okay, my pops is 60, 61, maybe that's that age where, your short-term memory starts going a little bit, nothing crazy. So we have a test at Kaiser's Memory Center, and essentially there are tests to see if you are losing memory or if you have certain things going on with you. He took the test, and that's when we found out. That's when we found out he was diagnosed, and he was diagnosed with dementia. The dementia form it took was Alzheimer's, and that's all we knew at the time. And I remember when I heard that news, I actually, I laughed. I laughed because I just was just like, this was so unbelievably a terrible year that I didn't know how to process it. So I just laughed, almost like the Joker in Batman. I just laughed. Like, what else can go wrong? Lo and behold, I had no idea what I was in for. I knew it was going to be rough. I knew what Alzheimer's was. I never really experienced anyone having it, but me having a minor in psychology, studying psychiatric diseases, Alzheimer's and dementia is considered like the worst one. Like, there really isn't anything worse when it comes to a mental disorder or a mental disease than Alzheimer's. So I knew it was going to be a rough journey. I just didn't have a clue how rough it was going to be. So that ends my 2016. Not much really changes. My dad is still fairly independent. His short-term memory is just kind of bad, but nothing crazy. So 2017, around summertime, is when I noticed that my dad is not really remembering to even pay his bills. I'm looking at the mail. There's bills not being paid at this time. My dad is old school. He just likes to pay checks. He doesn't have anything set up on auto pay or anything like that. And I'm just noticing that he's forgetting to pay bills. So I took it upon myself and I started paying my dad's bills, obviously under his name. But, I'm writing checks on his behalf. I'm setting everything up for him on his behalf. And I'm starting to, again, pay bills on his behalf. And essentially, I start taking over his finances. As I start taking over his finances, obviously, I'm looking through his banking transaction. My dad primarily banked with Bank of America, as I do, excuse me. So, and I'm noticing my dad's missing money. And I'm like, where's all this money going? And this is when I learned that my dad likes to spend a little too much money at the casinos. I knew my dad likes to gamble. I knew my father loves his scratchers. I have great memories of my father, of him taking me to the grocery store, liquor stores, but my favorite place would be donut stores. And he would just get scratchers. I would scratch with him, and whatever ticket he would buy me, if I won something on it, I would get to keep the money, whatever, never too much. It was like $5, $10, $20, but that's something I knew what he liked to do. It wasn't though that I looked into his bank account when I realized how much money this man was spending. And if I remember correctly, it was in the high hundreds and we're moving into thousands. And this was every other month. He's spending about $1,000 or so, maybe even more, on gambling. And this is 2017, and I know there's going to be a time where he's going to need care. So I'm like, okay, how do I manage this? How do I stop this? How do I, rectify this? So I would try talking to my dad and letting him know that, he can't really be doing this like that no more. Can't really be going out gambling to that extent no more. And he understood. He always acknowledged that he understood, but then he would just go with his girlfriend at the time and they would go gamble some more. So it really became a problem. So I tried talking to his girlfriend at the time. I would talk to my dad some more, but he was still gambling. I just got to the point where I had to take his cards away. I had to take his wallet away. I had to take his cards away so he wouldn't keep spending money. This was obviously hard for him. He didn't understand because he wasn't remembering. He wasn't remembering, that he didn't even remember that he was going to casino, let alone remember how much money he would spend in the casino. And there's more details about where the money was going and stuff like that, but we'll just kind of leave it there for now. This is still 2017 for the most part. He's still mostly independent minus his finances. But yeah, that's really it. He's going to dialysis. He's driving himself there. And that's really it. So moving along to 2018, his health is declining, both with his kidney failure and his Alzheimer's is getting worse. So now I'm really understanding that my dad needs some type of real help. But I'm looking at our incomes combined and, we're comfortable, but we're not balling out of control. Like we don't have money getting put away for something like this. So we just go ahead and we're doing the best we can. But this is when I start getting paperwork. And what is this paperwork? I've talked about it on my show before, but there's 2 documents. Let's just stop this right here. There's 2 documents everybody should have. At least 2. Really 3, but let's just focus on these 2. Number 1 is an advanced healthcare directive. This is specific to California. In other states, it's something different, but essentially you want some type of healthcare directive to instruct somebody you trust what to do when that time comes, when you're no longer able, or what we call have the capacity to make decisions for yourself health-wise. Or maybe you it doesn't matter. There's 101 ways this can play out. This could be you just get in a car accident and now you're in a coma. This could be you have Alzheimer's, you have memory loss. This could be a variety of measures. But however you get there, the point is you might get to a place where you can't make decisions for yourself. We don't like to talk about it, but trust me, guys, from my experience, you want to have this filled out. You want to have this discussion with your mother, with your father, with your siblings, heck, your aunties, your uncles, whoever you really have a strong relationship with. Have that discussion, fill out this document. I have the Kaiser version. The Kaiser version, I believe, is like 3 or 4 pages long. It's not that long. It doesn't take that long. It may take a couple hours of your day. I admit it is a hard talk. No one likes to talk about what to do when they die. No one likes to talk about how they want their funeral to be played out. But as someone who has gone to funerals, dealt with funerals, everything to funerals in my adult life, you'd rather have one than not. You'd rather have one than not. So I had that discussion with my father back in 2018. And one thing that my father kind of made it clear was he trusted my judgment. And I always appreciate that in my father, is he kind of just was like, all right, if this is what you think is best, then you go ahead and do it. So we made the healthcare directive. And then the second document number 2, is, oh man, I'm blanking out on what it's called. I believe it is called the financial. It's a financial healthcare directive. I'm blanking out what it's called exactly, but essentially it's a document where it's the same thing as the healthcare, but for finances. It's called the financial power attorney. That's what it's called. You want to get a financial power of attorney document. This document will empower a person to be able to manage another person's finances. So like the healthcare directive, not an easy conversation, but you want to have that conversation with your loved one. Again, this document is very powerful and it's very flexible. So you can even mark it to when it takes effect. So when I wrote it for my dad, it took effect immediately, but I wasn't practically using it until the next year. But you can have it take effect, when certain conditions happen for your loved one. But those are the two documents you should have. And the third document, I'll just talk about it briefly, is you definitely need to have it, really honestly for everybody, but especially for people who have any type of real assets like a home or a business or investments. And that's a trust. A trust, and alongside of it, a living will or a will. So you're going to want yourself to have a trust, and you want this trust and or living will to be very clear on what should happen to these financial assets of the loved one, in this case my father, once they get sick and or once they pass away. So one thing that both me and my father, we have the exact same kind of thing that we want. If we die, everything we've built goes to my niece and nephew, period. And anyone who knows me knows that I dang near look at my niece and nephew as my own daughter and son. Those are my brother's kids, and I try my best to make sure that they will have some stuff if and when I pass away unexpectedly. So we have this paperwork filled out. We have it notarized, meaning that you have to go to a special person who's licensed to sign this document and notarize it so it's official. If this document is not notarized, then the document doesn't work. People don't have to accept it. So these two of the three documents have to be notarized. That's the trust, and that is the financial power of attorney. In events, healthcare actually does not need to be notarized. You have to have it signed by two witnesses that are not direct family members of the loved one. Alternatively, a healthcare directive can be notarized. So this is happening now. His health is getting worse. 2018, I believe 2018 is the year where my dad is still driving, but I'm noticing that he's coming home later. Basically, I'm finding out that he's forgetting how to get home. Now, because I'm going blind and I had quit driving in 2016, my dad's picking me up from BART and taking me home, and that's how he was really helping me. But there would be times where it wasn't happening too often, but he would show up late, or he would just flat out call me and be like, I'm going to be late, or I might be lost a little bit. Didn't happen too often, but what I'm figuring out is he's losing his memory of direction. The good thing is anything he kind of knows he has to do to kind of survive or to help me out, he remembers that. But other than that, he's forgetting how to drive. 2018, I always say 2018 is like the last good year I had up until this day, or the last decent year I had. But moving along in 2019, this is the year things get tough, real tough. My dad gets to the point where he can't drive no more. He's literally not remembering the rules of the road now. Thank God he didn't get into a car accident. He didn't hit anybody or any property, but he's literally forgetting the rules of the road. He's forgetting how to get home. He's getting lost multiple times. I had to make the very tough and rough decision to take his keys away from him so he couldn't drive. At first, I just took the keys away. Well, I didn't take the keys away. I told him to not drive no more, but he can have the key because he loved to listen to the radio. My dad's a music guy. He's a DJ. He used to be a DJ. So he just liked to sit in his car and listen to the radio. But there would be times where he was just gone, and he would come. Fortunately, he would come back. So after a couple of times he did that, then, I took the keys away. I'll never forget how sad he was about that. And it was hard because you can tell he didn't understand. And that's what made it hard. He didn't understand why I took the keys away. He didn't understand why I was telling him he could no longer drive. I'll never forget how he just kept saying that, he's never been in a car accident. He's never gotten a ticket. And the 50-something, 45, 50-something years that he was driving. He had never done any of that, and all of a sudden I'm just taking his keys away. So yeah, it's rough. But ultimately, my job at this point was to make sure my dad was safe. So at that time, I also knew that I need to hire a caregiver because I had to work still to bring home some of this money. And I knew at that point that I couldn't leave my dad alone. That's just what it was. I couldn't leave my dad alone. So I hired the first caregiver. That went okay. That happened around March of 2019, I believe, was when we hired the first caregiver. But I can only afford to pay her for a couple hours a day out of the week. So I think I ended up hiring her for like a day or two out of the week for a couple hours. And then I gave her more hours as his health would get a little bit worse into the summertime. But it was still rough. I was basically, in a way, kind of a parent. I was going to work and coming home and taking care of my dad and relieving the caregiver. By this time, in the summer, well, I kind of moved around the summer of 2019, my dad is forgetting. He's forgotten so much. He's forgetting to take a shower. He's forgetting how to cook for himself. He's forgetting all the super basic things you need to remember just to just survive. He's truly kind of, at this point, no different than a 5-6-year-old as far as his ability to be independent. That summer is easily probably the worst part of my life. It was very emotionally difficult. That's actually an understatement. If I could cuss on the radio, I would cuss because that's how descriptive I would need to be accurate. It was agonizing. I was literally helping my dad bathe. I was picking out his clothes. In some cases, I was helping him change. I was helping him get ready to go to dialysis. At this point, he had completely forgotten about dialysis and why he needs to show up. It was getting to a point where he didn't want to go to dialysis. He was no different than a 5-year-old, taking him to the dentist, and the dentist is scared of poking his gums or his teeth. It was no different than that. I have memories of my dad. His best friend would help me out. My uncle would help me out. He would take my dad to dialysis, and all I'd have to do was get him ready so he can go. And once my dad would see my uncle's car, he would be like, "No, I'm not going." Like, he's not going. And I would have to explain to him. And this would be every other day. We would have to do this. And it was rough. There was a point where my dad couldn't sleep. His anxiety or his Alzheimer's, his depression, I'm sure he experienced it all. He couldn't sleep. So there would be days where I would go to his room and I effectively had to put him down like a kid. I remember putting up the Boondocks. That would be a show that we would watch together. And, I'm thinking he's falling asleep. And then I leave the room to go to sleep. And he come knock on my door. And he's just like, "I can't sleep." And I'm like, okay. And we tried everything. We tried medication. That didn't work. Obviously, all the natural stuff didn't work. I even had him take a hit from my cannabis pen or have some type of cannabis gummies, and none of that worked. So that summer was HELL. So by that time, I knew I was going to need full-time care. I knew that I couldn't handle it anymore. I was in a different relationship at the time. It was so stressful. I have never been in that level of stress. Not since not before nor since. And I don't think I ever will. The level of stress I was in was absolutely unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I have no idea how I didn't have panic attacks or anything like that. It was a very stressful time. At this point, I'm looking for full-time help. And then that's when I found 2 people to be able to come to the house and take care of my dad. So I would get that type of relief. So I hired them and they would start coming to the house. I essentially let go of the original caregiver and I had these 2 new caregivers to come into my house, and they would be there pretty much when I was not at home, including the nights. That's kind of where I got that. And that lasted until the fall. until eventually the caregivers offered to take him out of the house and into their home, so he would receive 24-hour care. And that's something we agreed upon. There was a price. That price was $8,000 a month. I agreed to it because that was still cheaper than a group home or a facility. And my dad moved out of the house. He moved out of the house sometime September 2019, not too far around his birthday. And I thought things would get easier, and they did not. Oh, they did not. So before I get into that, I just want to remind you guys, you're listening to your boy, Blondie himself, Mr. Finance himself, Darrin Harvey, at KGPC 96.9. And we are listening to my story about, my dad's journey through Alzheimer's, and we're just going to continue the story. So he's in the care of these two people, and at first it was all good. Everything was good, minus the normal adjustments. He wasn't understanding why he was in this new house, but it was mostly positive in the beginning. Then it wasn't. That was also arguably some of the most stressful times that I will probably ever experience in my life. The two caregivers clearly were not 100% trained to deal with someone like my father. They had previous experience dealing with elderly, but not to the scale of someone like my father. Again, my father needed 24/7 care, and they did the best they could, but there were definitely issues with their care. We had this roller coaster relationship. We'll just put it like that, a roller coaster like relationship. But I'm still doing what I can. I'm now out of my relationship. That was rough. My vision's getting worse, of course, but I couldn't focus on my health. I had to focus on my dad's health. So I'm going to a job that I can't stand, coming back home, and really not even come back home. I'm managing my dad's care from afar 24/7. This is something I do want to hit home. The payments. So as I disclosed earlier, I was paying $8,000 a month. Eventually got increased to $9,000 a month. The caregivers actually wanted more, but I had to push back on that. Because not only was I paying $9,000 a month, you guys are not mishearing me or misquoting. I am saying $9,000 a month every single month. I was also paying for clothing, bedding, other kind of things he needed. Really, the only thing I didn't have to pay out of pocket was food. Other than that, I still had to pay out of pocket on top of the $9,000 board and room that I was paying for. So at this time, this is when I started thinking, maybe I got to pull the plug. Pull the plug meaning call it a wrap for my dad, to just be blunt. My dad's kidney failure was getting much worse. The doctors made it clear that he didn't have much time left. So I was thinking about that. I was in contact with my extended family, his brother, his sister, their kids, which would be my cousins. And it was pretty universal that they didn't want that to happen. They wanted my dad to pass away, quote unquote, naturally. That's not what I wanted for my dad. If it was up to me, solely up to me, and I only cared about what I cared about, my dad would have passed away September 2019. I would have called it a day. Because my dad was so gone that he wasn't even my dad no more. I remember the day that he forgot my name. He forgot who I was. And it was crazy because he actually knew my name at first, but he didn't understand that I was his son. He thought I was his boss. And then he would talk about me in third person. He would describe that he had a son named Darrin and talk about him to me. That was hard. That was definitely hard. So the whole 2019, that late 2019, and now we're moving into 2020. Whew, man, because 2020, as a lot of you guys may remember not too long ago, pandemic hits. And that just adds another layer of difficulty to the situation. Obviously, my dad being 64 now, having kidney disease, Alzheimer's, super at risk for dying from COVID. Obviously, the whole suppliers chains getting screwed up, things being hard to find, medicine, all that stuff was into play. You guys know how that was. I don't need to describe it, but I just want to throw that out there that, yes, add COVID to the mess. And it was just a complete mess. Me and the caregivers having disagreements about things. Me and my extended family were having disagreements about things. And I truly felt in a lot of ways I was on my own. I was on my own to take care of my dad. I was getting minimal support or some support here and there from other people, but it was primarily myself. There were a lot of people who were more supportive, and I appreciate you guys for really being supportive. But minus the caregivers taking care of my dad 24/7, it was really me managing everything, making sure bills were getting paid on time, making sure making sure my father was getting the stuff that he needed. It was me. Between the job, which was incredibly stressful, and the caregiver situation, my extended family situation, I just took a leave of absence from work. I just couldn't do it no more. So I took that leave of absence, went on SDI, and just focused on trying to take care of my dad and manage that whole situation. So, at that point when I took a leave of absence, I was going with my dad to dialysis. So I would just sit there and chill with my father. And it was rough. That's when I really understood what it's like to be in dialysis 3 days a week, 4 hours a day. This is a place I would not want to be chilling at for 4 hours a day. And that was actually the jolt I needed to really start taking my health seriously. I was already losing weight. I had already been on keto. I think I had lost overall 50, 60 pounds at that point. But I really was just like, I can't be here. I cannot end up like this. So moving along, it's becoming August, summertime again, 2020, pandemic's in full effect. I can keep going about details and how much more stressful it was getting because of my dad. I'm really getting sick. He had lost all of his weight. He was he was skinny. My dad was a 6'1" man, and he must have weighed like a buck 70, a buck 60. He looked like somebody who was, just bulimia, just purging everything or something like that. Just anorexic is the word I'm looking for. He had really lost a lot of weight. He wasn't eating much anymore. The caregivers were struggling to find food that he would eat. And it was getting to a point where he was starting to refuse to go to dialysis. So it was just a struggle every day to just keep him going. And I'm really sitting over here I think it might be time. It might be time to pull the plug. So I'm having discussions with my family. They're still not co-signing it at all. Caregivers weren't really co-signing it. So I still didn't really do it. But it got to a point where I was going to do it. I decided that I was going to do it. I was going to do it a little bit after his birthday. That was the goal. I said, forget it. I know my father would not want to live in this condition. I mean, at this point, he was basically a baby. He was a baby. He could barely talk. I'm leaving out a lot of details to keep it as G-rated as possible. It was really hard to look at my dad. It was really hard to see my dad in the state that he was in. I just made the decision and said, to heck with this. It's time to pull the plug. To clarify what I mean by pull the plug, my dad was on dialysis. So for those who don't know, when you're on dialysis and you have kidney failure, you need to be on dialysis, and you need to be on dialysis regularly. My dad had gotten so sick with kidney failure that if he were to go without dialysis for about 2 weeks, he would pass away because his body would be filled with toxins, and that's because he didn't have kidneys to clean out his body. So pulling the plug was effectively canceling his dialysis treatment. So I made the decision to cancel his treatment. So I was going to do it sometime around the end of his birthday, early October. But my dad didn't even make it that long. As mentioned before, he did not want to go to dialysis. And it was getting to a point where the caregivers could not convince him to go. And the one thing I will say about my caregivers, they would never physically force my dad to do anything. If my dad physically didn't want to do something, they wasn't going to physically drag him or anything like that. They weren't going to do that. So I'll never forget, we tried to get him to go to dialysis, and my dad would just refuse to get in the car. And we would explain to him, like, you need to go. If you don't, you're going to pass away. And some part of me believes that he knew that, but he never acknowledged it. But the point is, he didn't end up going. So we that made the choice to pull it a little bit earlier. So he was off dialysis. Doc said that he had 2 weeks to live. So now he's on hospice. So we're dealing with hospice. Hospice is now involved in the picture. I'm there every day. My ex-girlfriend, Savannah, was there. And I tell people all the time, I will always love her for being supportive in my final days of my father, and really being supportive the entire time that we were together and he was sick. But, we were there. We would spend time with him. We would talk with him to the best we could, or the best he could, really. And it got to the point where he started sleeping a lot more. And then it got to the point where he just didn't wake up. I got the call September 28th, 2020. Got the call right in the morning. Caregivers just straight up told me he was gone. So went over there. His body was still warm. His body was still warm when we were there, but he was gone. And that's still, in a nutshell, that's just a summary. That's still not some of the details I would like to be able to put out, but I didn't want to make this a 5-hour long podcast. The point of the story, again, is you can't plan for stuff like this. We weren't planning for my father to have kidney failure. We weren't planning for my father to have Alzheimer's. We weren't planning to have money put away to be able to afford caregiving, 24/7 caregiving. I always tell people this: $9,000, and really I was probably spending $10,000 every other month, $9,000 every other month. I spent over $100,000 in the 1 year my dad was alive for that level of care. I am so grateful that my father owned a home, because there was no other way I would have been able to afford that. I would have, at the time, I didn't even have enough credit card line available to be able to pay that much money. I was good. I was in the 770s, I believe, at the time, but I did not have that money. So most people don't have $100,000 lying around out of nowhere. This is why I preach financial security. This is why I encourage everybody to have life insurance. Thank goodness my father had a $75,000 life insurance policy that paid for some of my credit card debt that I had to put myself into and his funeral. But even with that, I had to refinance the house. I took out $150,000. And then on top of that, I had the $75,000 when it was over, when it was all over with, for the funeral and other expenses. But I'm very lucky. I skipped out the parts where I was going to support groups, hearing all the people's stories about their loved ones, how it was, frankly, worse across the board for them than me. I heard stories, and I was giving advice to people about what to do if they didn't have the money, which there really isn't much. The initial facility that I wanted to put my dad in cost $15,000 in 2019. $15,000 a month is the facility I would have put my dad in if the caregivers weren't there. This is very expensive stuff. Alzheimer's is the world's most expensive disease. Your insurance will not cover it. Please, someone DM me if I'm wrong about that. I have never heard of insurance that will cover dementia and the care that goes around it. So I just want to share that story with you guys. So before I let you guys go, how do you guys prepare? That's the point. That's the point of this. How do we prepare for this? I do not want any of you guys who are listening to go through this nightmare that I'm still traumatized by. I'll be honest, this is some form of therapy for myself. talking about this because I don't talk about this a lot. I try to pretend that this doesn't exist because it was that traumatic. It was that difficult. Nothing I experience will probably be as difficult as those 4 years. I don't even think me going 100% blind will be that difficult. Might be close, but it won't be that difficult. How do we prepare? How do we prepare for our loved ones just in case they get sick? How do we prepare so that if you get sick one day, your loved ones don't have to deal with the stuff I have to deal with? It starts with everything I preach, everything that I teach, everything that I coach, I talk about. Setting up those retirement funds, getting yourself a life insurance policy. You guys, I pay $75 a month and I have a $750,000 life insurance policy. My niece and nephew, God forbid, if you guys hear that knock, God forbid I pass away today, my niece and nephew and my sister-in-law would have it better than they have it right now. Period. I worked too hard to make sure that everything's straight with me if I were to pass away. The easiest thing to do to prepare for this is a life insurance policy. Get a life insurance policy with living benefits, meaning that you can pull from it while you're still alive. Get it now. If you're 30-something, 20-something, 40-something, even 50-something, and you're healthy, get the dang life insurance. Literally, you can get a policy like mine under $100 a month. Like I said, I got $750. You don't need $750. You can get $250, and you'll be paying less if money is really that tight. But that's the easiest thing to do. Number one, I would say get a life insurance policy. DM me. I'm actually partner up with somebody to sign up people for life insurance policies. You ain't got to go through me. I don't care who you go through. Just get a life insurance policy. Number two, make sure that advanced healthcare directive is filled out, signed, your trust, and your financial power of attorney. Have these rough conversations. Trust me, I have been in funerals. I've been to funerals where none of this was talked about and planned out, and I took care of my dad's funeral where this was planned and talked about. Let me give you guys a hint. My dad's funeral was way easier to deal with. And that's not saying it was easy, but it was easier. Get these documents signed before your loved one is sick. Because if you don't have this paperwork, a lot of stuff that you need to do, you literally can't do, or it's going to take a lot longer and have a lot more hoops to jump through in order for you to do it. Heck, there was hoops I had to jump through when I had the paperwork. So get this paperwork done. And three, just do what I teach you guys to do in every episode, in every IG reel, in every clip I put out. Build yourself an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months so you can take off of work, buy yourself your time, focus on your loved one. 2, debt free. Get your credit lines up as high as possible. Have as much lines as possible. One of my personal goals this year is to open up 2 credit cards. I'm going to be opening up 2 credit cards every single year. I don't even want to use the credit cards. I just want the lines. I want the lines. I want the limits. I want as much limits as possible so that if you got to put your loved one in a center and you got to wait 90 days to refinance your home, you can still put it on your credit card, have that refinance money clear your credit card out. So 4, get some assets. Own your home. Make sure your home is getting paid off over the years. If you can get some investment properties, have some stocks, just investments in general that you can pull from just in case an emergency happens, get those under the way. Check out all the other episodes I talk about investments. I talk about stocks. I talk about financial planning. I talk about everything you need to know so you can prepare for something like this. This is why I'm passionate about financial coaching. I have said this 1 billion times and I will say this again. I don't care about having the biggest houses. I don't care about having the flyest cars. Heck, I'm blind. I can't drive them anyways. I don't care about having Gucci or Louis or Petite watches. I don't care about having Rolexes. I don't care about none of that. My goal and the reason I want to be financially independent is because I want to make sure that just in case I get sick or my niece and nephew get sick, someone I care about gets sick, they need a $50,000 surgery that isn't covered by insurance, a $250,000 surgery that isn't covered by insurance, or heck, $1 million surgery that is not covered by insurance. You guys need to understand, not every insurance is covered. And most insurances don't even cover the surgery 100%. We want to make sure we have these things in place so we're not stressing about money when a loved one is sick or literally dying. Thank you guys for listening. I needed this as much as you guys need to hear this example and story. I hope you guys take my advice. If you guys have questions, DM me at Financial State of Mind. I will answer anything you guys need to know. This is your boy, Blickety Bondi, yourself. Thank you. You've been listening to KGPC 96.9. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate you for listening to it on the website, kgpc.org, on your favorite streaming platform of choice. I love you guys. Thank you so much. Tune in next time. We're going to have some interviews. We're going to have some guests on the show. We're going to have a lot more fun. But I just wanted to start the new year out, get you guys motivated, get you guys, if you don't have a goal, set some goals for yourself. This is why I do it. You guys find your reason why you do it yourself. But until then, peace.
Money on my mind, so money is all I think of. Money on